So what will be at the top of your to-do list to improve administration and member experience?
Yeah, so what I was going to say was that if we could look back a little bit in terms of the journey that we've been on at the Pensions Regulator. So since 2021, we've shifted our engagement with administrators, and we are much more actively, directly engaging with the pensions administration market and ecosystem, including software providers and ISPs. That culminated in a 12-month engagement with 15 administrators representing a diverse cross-section of the industry last year, also representing around 40% of scheme memberships for occupational pension schemes. That diversity was really important, just first of all, because we do recognise that there are significant differences in operational model and nuanced challenges that administrators face. But that gave us a lot of great reflections on best industry practice. It also highlighted organisation level and systemic level challenge as well. I think one of the core messages that came out from that engagement was that underinvestment in administration has been normalised. That's resulting in administrators operating with fragmented systems, with fragile controls, with inconsistent or degrading data. And particularly from a capacity and resourcing perspective, I think we're seeing some of the strain now. There are informal controls within some of these organisations, and when I refer to informal controls, I refer to legacy staff who are highly experienced, highly knowledgeable, but they're retiring from the market quicker than they can be replaced. So fundamentally, that underinvestment today leads to delivery bottlenecks tomorrow. What that means from a trustee scheme manager perspective is that there should be a focus and a move away from minimising cost to maximising resilience. But that's a dual dialogue with administrators as well. And what we expect from administrators is that they are very clearly able to articulate value for investment, and that they focus not just on outputs but on outcomes. So to loop it all back, I think that underinvestment piece and now the collaborative relationship with trustees, scheme managers, administrators to remedy some of that is what I see as kind of one of the core issues facing the industry.
Thanks, Taylor. David?
I'll just pick up on the comment of minimum. Is this working? Minimum cost, maximum resilience doesn't kind of smack you as great member outcomes necessarily, does it? I'm sort of quite struck by actually some of the conversation I had about how busy everybody is sometimes on quite long projects, and keeping motivation going on some of those is quite difficult. But I suppose what I have seen in the marketplace is people approach taking on new administration clients in one of two different ways. Either they invest hugely when they take on a new client, they clean up the data massively, they digitize and automate everything. And then, as I was saying in my speech, then the ongoing kind of running of the scheme is pretty easy to do. And then you see other organizations who take administration on, they live with the fact that the data is not complete. They live with the fact that they've probably got to go into cardboard boxes and find bits of data to work out actually what somebody's entitlement is. And either of those, it seems to me, kind of worked until the dashboard came along. And one of the things that struck me when I was at the regulator was the dashboard might be the catalyst to get everybody to actually properly clean their data, make sure it's digitized, automate as many calculations as possible. And as I was saying, you know, it will sort of expose those people who said data's great, but actually every time you move administrator, the new administrator finds that actually all the kind of the great reassurances that the previous administrator gave the trustees maybe weren't quite as accurate as they could be. So I'm intrigued, given that you've been engaging with administrators, whether you share that belief that the dashboard is actually going to force investment in the technology that you say has been underinvested in.
So I think there's a few things to unpack probably from that, David. I think that we are aligned in terms of the focus to put savers at the centre of all of these solutions, and certainly when we talk about resilience, we are most certainly talking about ensuring the right outcomes for members and savers. I would agree with you that Dashboard will be a fantastic catalyst for change within the market, and we're already seeing that. It's been a highly collaborative endeavour across industry, and we're certainly seeing some great practice coming from the industry. I would just temper a little bit to say that our view is that we do want to see dashboards used as a springboard to better deliver for members, to provide more engaging functions, to improve data, as David's already touched upon. But I would caution that we shouldn't sleepwalk into thinking just because we are doing a dashboard project, that means that our data necessarily improves and that it improves in the way that we would hope it to do so. It's really about trustees, scheme managers, administrators working together collaboratively to have a clear strategic direction for their data and their technology. Dashboards will help with that, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, if I can add, I agree, Taylor, because I think being from an insurer who's regulated by the FCA and the work that we've done over the last few years on the duty, through increasing our resilience and thinking about how we store our data, how we back up our data, how we provide better services to our members, give them the information that they need at the time that they need it. That means when it comes to integrating with the dashboard, it's been a lot easier for us because that data is already in a place, structured, available, and we've got a lot more technical services and APIs available that's meant that serving this data up externally has been made easier. So I think I agree with you that the dashboard isn't the end. The dashboard is enabled by increasing that resilience, having better practices, having better technology, and it's what the members expect, and that's the reason for doing it, not just to enable yourself onto a dashboard.
I'm going to ask this question because Taylor can't. Is it better to be regulated by the FCA or the pensions regulator?
It's better to be regulated by a body that cares about the member experience, and therefore I think
it's a very diplomatic answer.
There's just maybe one for the audience. So, Chris.
Yeah. So I take the point on data. So thanks, Chris Smart from Museo. So one of my mandates is about client audits. This is where since it's trustees of transition administration fully provided to ourselves. And what we often find is that the data quality is where it needs to be, to your point, David, about catwalk boxes. But where does the cost sit? And who is accountable for paying for that data quality and movement? Because as an issue as a scheme administrator, we have to migrate that data and put it into our systems. But should the responsibility of administrators to fund that cost, or should the trustee set that data cleansing exercise?
So my experience has been the seeding administrator says the data's clean and automated. It's all on the system. And that's the reassurance that they've given to the trustees. And sometimes you find the trustees have been charged for data cleanse exercise. So, if it's a DB scheme, there's been an actuarial valuation, the data's been cleaned. And then it comes 3 years later, you come to the next valuation and the administrator says, can I have some more money to clean the data? Because actually it was kind of clean for the actuarial valuation, but then it wasn't maintained. So there's a job to do. So quite often, you pitch for a new piece of administration, you're told the data's clean and accurate, so you price accordingly, and then you open the boxes and you find it wasn't so. And so as a administrator that's taking on the business, you go back to the trustees and say, well, actually we were told it's clean, it's not clean. We'd like to charge you £200,000 to clean the data and make sure that it's great so that we can deliver a great ongoing service. And of course the trustees say, well, we're not going to pay that, because actually if it's not, then it's not our fault, it's the previous administrator. So as the new administrator, you go to the seeding administrator and say, please can we have 200,000 to clean the data that you said was clean? And the seeding administrator says, we've just lost the business, mate, we're not going to pay you anything. And so you kind of end up in that triangle. And I think it is a real issue, because actually, I perfectly understand why trustees don't want to pay for that, and it's a real barrier potentially to move administrators. And quite often moving administrator, we just published some guidance in PASA actually, that's sort of saying, actually develop a relationship with the administrator, because moving administrators is really quite challenging. But you do end up in that where almost nobody wants to pay, and then as the administrator that's taking on the business, and if you're making the investment to clean the data and digitize it, you're probably going to make a loss for the first 3 years that you've got that client, and if you're lucky you break even in year 4, you make a profit in year 5, and then it goes back out to tender again. And that for me is not a kind of a sustainable environment. I'm a sort of naive and optimistic. I do hope that and believe that the dashboard will help significantly. But it's a real challenge. And in the DWP consultation, one of the things that they're worried about is, given that government's driving this massive consolidation, what happens if a third-party administrator suddenly pulls out the market? Will people still get their pension on the following Friday? And I think it's really quite difficult, because as we all know in this room, if you take on an administration client, you don't do it in 10 minutes. It can take months, and if it's one of the big public service contracts, it could take years. And I think that is a real worry, because actually probably government doesn't care too much if an actuarial firm goes out of business or a professional trustee firm. But if an administrator goes out of business, then people don't get their benefits, they don't get their pension, and you can see that actually Taylor will get a call to say appear in front of a select committee to explain why you didn't do anything and what you're going to do. So Taylor, when you get that call, what are you going to say?
Yeah, don't really know why I'm laughing. I think it's a really important point though about the accountability, isn't it? And it goes to a little bit about this before and after picture and the two not quite marrying up. So we completed what we refer to in a snappy title as a data quality regulatory initiative last year. So we were working with hundreds of schemes to understand their data reporting, and it was all fundamentally based around reporting of common and conditional data scores. And there were some really, really reassuring messages coming from the market. And
do you believe them?
I believe what we've been told to an extent, certainly, because I think that was tempered with the reality of some other challenges, which fundamentally related to a over-reliance on administrators when it comes to the scoring and reporting of data, which I think is fundamentally what leads to that disconnect between we were told this, actually the position is that. And fundamentally, that requires governing bodies, trustees, scheme managers to have stronger oversight of how your data is being reported against, what tests are being run, and fundamentally what your data score is telling you. We've updated our data guidance in November last year. Please do go and read it if you haven't had the opportunity to do so already. But a significant shift in that guidance is that we're being clear, we don't expect people to be reporting 100% in terms of their data scores. We'd love it if that was the kind of accurate position, but what we would much prefer is that people are reporting a realistic position and that they have a strategy to remedy any issues that are causing saver detriment. That's the more important fundamental piece. But it does come back to that point that David was touching upon about the before and after expectations.
I also think this is where companies like Procentia can really help, because it's great to see the innovation that you're doing with IntelliAI, because a lot of those sorts of solutions are going to enable administrators to understand Ben specs, interrogate member data, convert scans into structured data far easier, and therefore it won't necessarily be a debate about who's going to pay the 200,000 because the technology is going to enable us to do it so much cheaper and so much quicker.
But you must be inheriting some of these schemes and seeing, it's not necessarily just changing the administrator, but you're inheriting the kind of quality of administration.
That's right.
And I kind of understand that, by the time it reaches you, it might have gone through a data cleanse exercise.
But as part of the PRT deal, we go through a big data validation and data cleanse exercise. But yeah, we're investing heavily in AI capability, and that's really speeding things up and helping to enrich that data as it comes to us for administration.
So what makes your life easiest? What do you like to see?
I think it's about bringing the cleanse as far left as possible. Particularly in a PRT deal where we're worrying about making sure that we understand the members' benefits, so that as they go into retirement, they get the right values. So we need pension schemes to be on top of this. We need pension schemes to be validating their data and getting it in a good condition so that all administrators and potentially us as insurers are able to provide those best services for the member. And then I think that's where your point about the dashboard comes, because that really is going to trigger them into doing this activity as far left in the plan as possible.
Just to switch tack slightly, someone mentioned it this morning, but I'm interested in all the panellists' view, but particularly if we start with you, Russ. We've talked about, I think one of the challenges for administration has been a race to the bottom in terms of pricing, and actually trustees, schemes, if you think the worst offenders are probably the centrally funded public government schemes where they have an unrealistic expectation of, let's say, the per member cost on an annual basis. But are you seeing a shift, Russ, into where we are seeing, instead of administration just being seen as a cost, to a sort of more of a value-led service? I just wondered from an insurer perspective, are you seeing that shift?
Definitely. So a lot of the schemes that approach us now, they want it built into the contract that will at least match the digital services that their deferred members have today. And these digital services aren't really basic. It's the ability to produce illustrations, do retirement planning, think about how DC and DB pots come together. And as I say, they want that built into the contract so that their members don't experience a deterioration in service. Schemes are much better funded now than they have been in the past, so therefore that drive to the lowest cost is not quite so much of a factor, and therefore a lot of the member-based trustees are holding to us to account on service really highly.
Okay. David?
Well, I was kind of thinking back to when I was at the Regulator, and I kind of used to harp on about people getting their data right for the dashboard, but also sort of trying to get a message to trustees that actually it was important to pay administrators the right amount of money so that they can actually deliver the service that they need to, that they can invest in technology and so on. I'm not, if I'm brutally honest, I'm not quite sure how many trustees actually listen to me. And, it's true of business that gets transferred to master trusts. I would say it's really important that you should have an EDI policy. It's really important that you should pay attention to climate and strategy. And then the master trusts were saying to me, but actually, David, we kind of do all those things, and then we actually lose the business because we do 2 basis points more expensive than the person next who's not. So I'd be interested in Taylor's view of actually whether the market really is changing. I mean, I don't think the minister could be more clear that he sees administration as absolutely critical. He sees it as a strategic delivery mechanism. He puts a really high focus. And I sort of think, for too often government, I mean, if you look at the IHT changes where the suggestion was that administrators would work out the IHT bill and then pay it, even though they didn't necessarily have all the information to do that. I sort of sometimes think that these policies get created and nobody thinks about actually how are we going to deliver it. And one of my roles as chair of PASA is to try and get government to realise that actually there might be different ways of delivering a policy, but thinking about administration, the administrators, and what is easily or more easily delivered as a policy outcome by thinking about the impact it has on an administrator. I sort of think, I hope that's a message that is getting through. But Taylor, do you think trustees are hearing the message of they need to pay more?
Yeah, I think they are. I think the messaging is clear, and in our engagement with these administrators, they recognised it in themselves. They noted that they had been part of the problem in terms of driving costs to the bottom. So I think that it goes back to that collaboration point. It's not purely on trustees, scheme managers, though they ultimately remain accountable for the administration. There is a shift in behaviour and culture that needs to happen within administration as well. We want to see administrators treated as a strategic function in the same way that investment and funding are treated. David spoke about it earlier. I'll refer to two of his points actually. One about the consolidating market, which was referenced in the keynote, but he's also spoke just now about the question within the DWP consultation about disorderly market exit. That disorderly market exit risk is intensified as the market consolidates, but it also leads to increased behavioural change in relation to cost. So I think that we are seeing trustees start to see the cracks showing of years of underinvestment. I think that the dashboard is being transformational, will be transformational in really airing some of those. And I think one of the things that it will really bring to light is, and perhaps this goes to others' points around both that data improvement piece and everything else, but dashboards are going to make pensions more visible, more transparent than they've ever been in this country, ever. And that is going to be a huge expectation shift. Pension schemes, administrators need to be preparing for operational capacity strain. We don't know what that might look like. Experience from Europe is that it's not sometimes as bad as you might be worried it is. But beyond that, one of the things that we know fundamentally will shift, and European equivalents tell us this, is people's expectation and their engagement with their pension. That's about to shift significantly, and I think then that brings in a different dialogue and a different focus in that cost versus value conversation.
Yeah, I'd agree, and actually just wanted to get the audience actually on that. So was someone who lived through the 2015 freedoms at a TPA, I wanted to just get a feel from clients out there, you've just said it, Taylor, how prepared do you feel? I mean, do you feel that you've weighed up the operational risks and the operational impacts, or are you feeling nervous that actually you could get inundated? I'd just be really interested in some views from the audience on preparedness for dashboard. I mean, I think it is the right thing to do to get people engaged with their pensions, but are you suddenly going to get inundated with transfer value quotes? Probably. And how we've talked about the shortage of qualified pensions administrators. So just get a sense if anyone in the audience is willing to share how they're feeling about dashboards from an administration perspective.
If you're not prepared, just don't give your name or company in front of Taylor.
No, I'll close my eyes.
Oh, no. All right, yeah. Jeff?
Thank you, David Cheatham, here at Brightwell. We are, there's a lot of uncertainty. As Taylor said, we don't know what the impact will be, whether it's 10%, 50% increase in member queries. We can guess how members would change. They'll be more interested taking action because they don't have enough money, whether that's consolidating, whether that's understanding how pension interacts with their existing savings. So we can step through what we think that'll mean for the operation, what FAQs, what comms we need to prepare. But I think ultimately, we don't know. We know we need to have more people, we need to be prepared, we need to have more capacity. We know, that's a long lead time to building that up. We don't know when dashboard will go live, but we can guess, so we're preparing, but what we're really focusing on is learning from consumer testing. So, we've just completed the moderated user testing. 20 or 30 people have tested, 4 of them had BTS pensions. We knew none of them asked us any questions off the back of using the dashboard. Doesn't mean there'll be no questions later, but we'll be watching very closely as the unmoderated testing kicks off next month. 600, 900, 1,800, 3,000 people use it. We'll hopefully get enough data to better forecast how dashboard will impact member engagement, and we'll do things to make that as visible as possible, like having a dedicated phone number on the dashboard that so we can track exactly how members behave if they started their journey on the dashboard, for example.
Great, thanks, David. Jeff?
Totally ready. Yeah, excellent. Is that totally ready? Well, look, what are we nervous about? Well, 24/7, 365, 95%, 99.95% availability. That's quite a big ask. That's a concern. But what's got our focus is, can our supplier deliver this? We've got a live website. Obviously, we worry about availability, but now we've got you guys monitoring us. It's a concern. It's something we've got to put a lot of thought into now, and a lot of discussion with Procentia.
I mean, I think you're right, Liam. I think it will be quite an impact with a lot of contact from the members. In our planning, we've been looking at the Norway model and kind of what's happened there, and that's driven a lot of contact and usage of the dashboard. So I think the industry has got to be ready for a lot of engagement from the public, and therefore a lot of engagement with the scheme. But again, I come back to, this is where I think technology is a real enabler. We've been doing a lot of work with the dashboard. We're one of the first to connect to it. By the time we're live, we think we'll be over 90% automated responses, but it's still going to drive contact, and it's still going to drive further conversation. So I think you're right. But again, it comes back to we've got to be investing in the technology. We've got to have the tools. We've got to have the data. We've got to have and David, I think perhaps the trustees were listening to you, but it was hard and it was expensive. Technology is a bit more in a space now where things are a lot more doable. As a very quick aside, 15 years ago, I was talking to our technology suppliers about adding email address to our systems and being given an estimate of 190 person days to implement just catching the email address, because the way that. But over the years, we've obviously invested in newer technologies that are more flexible, quicker to change, quicker to release, and therefore we're in a much better position for things like integration with the dashboard, and it's not so expensive. And whereas years ago it would have been too expensive to consider.
I know that people are always a bit reluctant to say they're not quite there in front of the regulator from experience, but it might be helpful if you, so if people have not made any attempt to get ready for the dashboard, you might be quite hard on them. But I'm presuming that if they've had a sort of valiant attempt but they're not quite there, at least in the early days, the regulator is going to be lenient, understanding.
We'll be taking a pragmatic position, and I think that, as you've touched on there, David, it's about the history of what's happened to get the scheme to that point. And it goes back to the conversation around data quality and data scores. In terms of data scores, if you report 100% clean data, but actually the way that you're measuring that data is so limited that you're not really looking strategically at how you use it, how you deliver for members, then that's as bad as reporting a bad data score and not having a plan to remedy it. So I think that you're right, that there'll be a level of pragmatism, and we are certainly looking to avoid unnecessary regulatory burden. The reassuring thing is, so we are just in the process of wrapping up an engagement with 51 of the largest schemes in the UK, focused on their preparations for pensions dashboards, and that's been really positive. As part of that dialogue, there are some that still need to go on a bit of a journey, but I think through that we are able to then engage with them. It's one of the things that I think the dashboard team at the Pensions Regulator have done really well over the last few years, is they have gone out to industry, they have actively collaborated, they have actively engaged and want to understand those challenges. And that's something that I would really encourage in the future. We want to collaborate with industry, we want to speak to you early, we want to speak to you openly, and we want to speak to you often. And we would really hope that where there are challenges materialising, if it relates to preparation for pensions dashboards or something beyond that, that people will come to us and they'll have a conversation with us. That is the same for trustees and scheme managers, but it's also the same position for administrators as well.
Brilliant, thanks. I think that's all we've got time for this discussion, so I'd like to thank the panellists, David, Taylor and Russ, and we'll move into the next session.